The first time I saw my own memorial program, my daughter was standing right across the room from me. My picture was on the front. My name was underneath it. The homeless read, and right below that, "A life of service, lovingly remembered." I read it twice. Then I noticed the date, Saturday, 6 days away. There was no date of death, no funeral announcement, no casket. Instead, the program called it a retirement and legacy appreciation event, honoring my 38 years of service to the community. On paper, it looked like a farewell. But the picture was wrong. The wording was wrong. And the strangest part? My daughter was the one who'd arranged the whole thing. According to the story she'd already been telling people, I was tired. I was slowing down. I'd decided it was time to step away from the business. Except, I hadn't. I was 69 years old. I was still working, still making decisions, and very much alive. What I didn't understand yet was that my daughter didn't need me to be dead. She needed everyone else to believe I'd already given up control. Welcome back to Revenge Realm. Subscribe for more family betrayal stories. My name is Thomas Reed. For 38 years, I ran Reed & Sons Funeral Home in a small Pennsylvania town where people remember everything: who married whom, who lost a parent, who sold a farm, who stopped talking to a brother. I'd spent most of my adult life around death, so I understood something a lot of people don't. A funeral isn't just about the person who died. It's also about the story the living agree to tell. And that's exactly why this program bothered me. It wasn't that I hated the idea of being honored. At 69, I could admit I liked the idea of people remembering the work I'd done. But that photograph, that was different. It was one Carol had used years earlier for our anniversary invitations. My wife had been gone for 7 years. Melissa knew exactly what that picture meant. And she knew how strange it would look on something that felt almost like an obituary. I turned the page. There were pictures of the funeral home, old community events, families I'd helped over the years, a paragraph about my work. Then I saw one sentence that made my stomach tighten. The Reed family will begin a new chapter of service under the leadership of Melissa Reed. I read it again. That wasn't a retirement tribute. That was a succession announcement. And nobody had asked me. My daughter, Melissa, was 38. She'd worked at the funeral home for almost 12 years. She was organized, persuasive, and very good with grieving families. She could walk into a difficult room and somehow make people feel understood. I'd always been proud of her for that. But there was something else she'd wanted for years: control of the business. And that difference between what she wanted and what I was willing to give her had been growing between us for a long time. Melissa believed I trusted her brother, Andrew, more than I trusted her. Andrew lived 3 states away. He was an electrician. He'd never wanted anything to do with the funeral business. But after Carol died, Andrew came home almost every weekend for 3 months. He didn't come home to talk about ownership. He came home because he knew I was hurting. Melissa remembered those months very differently. I just didn't realize how differently until much later. The Monday after I found the program, Melissa came into my office around 9. She set a cup of coffee beside my paperwork. Decaf. I looked at it. I didn't ask for coffee. "You've been drinking too much. I've been drinking coffee since before you were born." She smiled. "And you're still alive." We both laughed. At the time, I thought it was just a harmless joke. Then she sat down. "Dad, we need to talk about the business." I closed my folder. That's usually how bad conversations begin. "I'm serious. So am I." She folded her hands. "What happens if something happens to you?" "Something already happened to me." "What?" I turned 69. She didn't laugh. "You're avoiding the question." "No, I'm avoiding the drama." She leaned forward. "Have you talked to Andrew about succession?" That got my attention. "Why would I?" "Because he's your son." "So am I your daughter." "Exactly. What are you asking?" "I want to know what your plans are." "My plan is to work tomorrow." "That's not what I mean." "I know." She glanced toward the hallway. "You can't keep doing everything yourself." "I don't. You still approve every major expense because it's my business, and that's the problem." I studied her face. "What problem?" She hesitated, then she said, "What happens when you can't?" Something about that question didn't sit right with me. It didn't sound like concern. It sounded like preparation. Like she wasn't really asking what I planned to do. She was waiting for me to confirm something she'd already decided. I said, then we'll deal with it when it happens. She stood. Dad, you don't have to wait until something happens. She reached the door, then turned around. You should start preparing people. For what? For when you're not running this place. I stared at her. She left. I sat there alone for several minutes. That afternoon, Sandra Lewis came into my office. Sandra had supplied flowers to Reed & Sons for years. She put a folder on my desk. Your daughter asked me to get your approval. For what? She opened it. New administrative authority. I looked at the first page. Melissa's name was right there. Operations Director. Reed & Sonch already had an operations title. This new agreement would give her broader authority over vendors, payroll approvals, and administrative matters tied to the property. I frowned. Who authorized this? Melissa. Not me. Sandra looked uncomfortable. I assumed you two had discussed it. We haven't. She closed the folder. Before she left, she stopped. Thomas? Yes? She told us you wanted to step away quietly. I looked at her. Did she? Sandra nodded. She said you were tired and wanted the transition handled without making a big announcement. I didn't answer after Sandra left. I called Melissa. She picked up right away. Dad? Sandra was here. Okay. She says you're telling people I'm stepping away. You are planning to. No. Dad, no. She sighed. You can't keep pretending nothing has changed. What changed? You're tired. Everyone gets tired. You've forgotten things. I forget birthdays. You forgot that insurance meeting. I rescheduled it after I reminded you. That doesn't mean I can't run my business. Her voice softened. You don't understand how different you are now. That sentence stuck with me, not because I believed it, because suddenly I realized she wanted other people to hear it. I asked, who else have you told? About what? About me. Nobody. She was lying. I knew it, but I didn't confront her. I just said, all right. That evening, I made a decision. I wasn't going to ask Melissa what she was doing. I was going to find out for myself. The next morning, before the employees arrived, I went through the ownership files. That's when I found a request for a certified copy of the deed to the funeral home. The request had been made 6 weeks earlier, and the requester was an entity I'd never heard of, Reed Legacy Properties, LLC. I stared at the name. Then I called Arthur Bennett, my attorney. Arthur had represented me for almost 20 years. When I told him the name, he went quiet. Where did you see that? In my property records. Don't change anything yet. You're the third person to tell me that. I'm serious, Tom. So am I. I'll check the registration. 20 minutes later, he called. Your daughter created it. I sat down. What does it own? Nothing? Yet? That's what I'm checking. He explained that Melissa had created the LLC as a holding company. There was nothing automatically wrong with that. An LLC could hold property. An owner could transfer a building into one. But I'd never agreed to transfer my building, Arthur continued. There's an authorization attached to the restructuring documents. What kind? A property authorization? Meaning? It claims you appointed Melissa to sign documents related to the property on your behalf. I stared at the wall. I never did that, I know. Then what's on it? Your name? Anything else? Your signature. I stopped breathing for a second. Arthur, are you telling me someone forged my signature? I'm telling you the signature on this document doesn't appear to be yours. How sure are you? Not enough to make the final call yet. Then what? I want an independent signature examiner to compare it with your known signatures. When? I can send it today. Do it. He paused. Tom, don't confront Melissa until we know exactly what we're dealing with. I won't, and don't sign anything she brings you. I won't. Arthur sent the document to an independent signature examiner. The report would take several days. I knew I had to wait, but I wasn't going to sit around doing nothing. I made copies of every original property document and moved the originals to Arthur's office. He also notified the relevant parties in writing that I disputed Melissa's authority and hadn't authorized any property transfer. Then, the next morning, Arthur called again. There's another problem. What? A buyer has made an offer on the building. I stood. How much? He gave me the number. It was enough money to change my family's future, and it was also enough to explain why Melissa had suddenly become so interested in my retirement. Who is the buyer? A regional investment group. Do they know about me? They believe Melissa is acting for you. Why? Because that's what she told them. Do they have the authorization? Yes. Then they think it's real. That's what worries me. Now I understood the basic plan. Melissa had created the LLC. She'd prepared a document claiming I'd authorized her. She'd found a buyer, and she'd started telling people I was stepping away. But one question still bothered me. Why did she need the whole town to believe it? If the buyer already believed her paperwork, why go through the trouble of organizing a public retirement event? That question became even more important when I called Andrew. When did Melissa last call you? About 2 weeks ago. What did she want? She asked whether you'd ever talk to me about selling the business. My stomach tightened. What did you tell her? No. Did she ask anything else? She asked whether I'd support her if you retired. And I told her I'd support you. He paused. Dad, what's going on? I told him about the LLC, then the property authorization, then the buyer. He didn't interrupt. When I finished, he said, I'll come home. You don't need to, I think I do. Andrew, this isn't about money, Dad. I know. No, I don't think you do. His voice softened. After Mom died, you stayed at that funeral home every day. I came home because I knew you needed someone. I looked down at my desk. I remember. I don't think Melissa remembers it the same way. He was right. Andrew came home the following evening. We sat in my kitchen. For almost an hour, we talked about Carol, not Melissa, not the property, not money. Carol had always hated family arguments. She used to say families rarely break in one huge moment. They break in little moments nobody bothers to fix. Eventually, Andrew looked at me. Do you remember what Mom told us after Grandpa died? Which thing? Don't confuse fairness with keeping score. I smiled. That sounds like her. Andrew nodded. Melissa has been keeping score for years. I didn't defend my daughter. I couldn't. Then Andrew pulled out his phone. I need to show you something. He opened an email thread. Melissa had contacted him before about succession because he was still listed in an old family ownership discussion. She'd copied him on a message meant for a financial consultant. The subject line read, Transition after Dad's decline. He read the email. Melissa wrote that I was becoming increasingly resistant to change. She wrote that the business needed someone younger. She wrote that the property should be moved into a separate family entity before my condition became worse. I looked up. She sent this to you? She copied me. Why? I don't know. Andrew shook his head. I almost deleted it. Why? Because I didn't want to believe she was talking about you like that. That made sense. Andrew wasn't some perfect son waiting to swoop in and save me. He was a brother who didn't want to believe his sister could do this. He had to decide for himself what the evidence meant. I read the email again. Then I noticed one phrase, before Dad is unable to sign. I looked at Andrew. She's not waiting for me to retire. He understood. She's trying to make retirement look inevitable. Exactly. And suddenly the memorial program made sense. Melissa didn't need the town to believe I was dead. She needed everyone to believe I'd voluntarily stepped aside. If the buyer saw a public farewell, employees heard a succession announcement, and people around town believed I'd already retired, then Melissa's private claim of authority would look like a normal family transition. The story would make the paperwork look legitimate. But I needed proof before I confronted her. The signature examiner's report was still pending, so I decided to test something else. I needed Melissa to make her claim directly. The next morning, I called her into my office. She came in carrying a folder. I have something for you to sign. I leaned back. What? She smiled. I thought you might finally be ready to discuss the transition. Maybe. She sat. What changed? You were right about one thing. She waited. We need a plan. Her shoulders relaxed. Okay. I want you to handle the conversation with the buyer. She looked surprised. I can do that. Good. But what exactly do you want me to tell them? Tell them what you've been telling everyone. That you're stepping away? Yes. She hesitated. Are you? I didn't say that. Her expression changed, I continued. But if you believe you have authority to negotiate the property, I want you to explain exactly what gives you that authority. She went still. I don't understand. I think you do. She closed the folder. You've been talking to Arthur. I talk to Arthur all the time. About the property? I talk to my attorney about my property. She stood. Dad, why are you doing this? I'm asking a simple question. What document gives you the right to sign for me? She stared at me. The authorization you signed? I never signed it. You did? No. Her jaw tightened. You may not remember. There it was, not anger, not panic, certainty. She'd already decided what she'd say if I challenged her. I looked at her. Then you won't have any trouble explaining that authorization to the buyer. She said nothing. I didn't tell her about the examiner. I didn't tell her Arthur had already notified the buyer. I just said, all right. She left. As soon as the door closed, I called Arthur. She confirmed it. She said, you signed? Yes, good. Good. Now we have her statement and the document. We just need the examiner's report. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't just defending myself. I was building a record. The following afternoon, Arthur called. His voice was different. Tom, what happened? The report came back. I sat down. What does it say? The examiner concluded that the signature on the authorization wasn't written by you. I closed my eyes. Are you certain? Yes. Can we use it? Yes. Send me a copy. I already have it. I looked at the clock. Arthur. Yes? The memorial is tomorrow. I know. Then tomorrow she won't just be celebrating my retirement. No, she's going to announce it. Arthur was quiet. That's what I think. Everything was finally coming together. The LLC, the authorization, the buyer, the retirement story, the memorial program, the public announcement. Behind the scenes, Melissa was trying to transfer the property. In public, she was building a story that made the whole thing look like a normal family transition. The property was the deal. The false authorization was how she planned to make it happen. The retirement story was the cover. I decided to wait one more day. Not because I was scared, because I wanted the lie to become impossible to defend. If you were Thomas, would you confront Melissa immediately, or wait until you had enough proof to stop everything at once? Saturday morning, I went to St. Matthew's. The church secretary recognized me immediately. Her face changed. Mr. Reed, good morning. She looked at the folder in my hand. Are you here for the tribute? What tribute? She hesitated. Your retirement recognition. Who arranged it? Your daughter. Did she tell you I approved it? The secretary looked uncomfortable. She said you knew about it. Did she tell you I'd be here? No. Did she tell you why I wouldn't be here? She said you wanted the event to focus on the future of the business. That told me everything I needed to know. The church wasn't trying to help Melissa deceive anyone. They'd simply been given a believable version of events. A retirement recognition, a community tribute. A farewell for a man who'd served the town for 38 years. The deception was in everything Melissa had attached to that celebration. The photograph, the obituary-style wording, the idea that I'd already surrendered control, and the announcement about who would lead the business next. I walked inside. The room was almost full. Flowers lined the front. Photographs of Reed and Sons over the years were arranged on easels. People I'd known for decades sat in the chairs. Some had lost parents at my funeral home. Some had lost spouses. Some had trusted me with the worst days of their lives. At the front was a large display. My photograph, beneath it, Thomas Reed, A Life of Surface, lovingly remembered. Melissa stood beside it. She wore a dark dress. Her hands were folded. Copies of the program sat on a nearby table. I stayed near the back. I wanted to hear what she would say. The minister stepped to the microphone. We're gathered today to recognize a man who served this community for nearly 4 decades. People applauded. I stayed silent. The minister continued. Thomas Reed has made the difficult decision to step away from daily operations and allow the next generation to carry his work forward. More applause. Melissa looked down, then the minister said, Please welcome his daughter, Melissa Reed, who will help lead Reed and Sons into its next chapter. That was when I knew the whole plan was out in the open. I walked forward. The room went quiet. The minister stopped speaking. Someone in the second row whispered, Thomas? Melissa looked up. The color drained from her face. She stared at me like I was someone who wasn't supposed to be there. I kept walking. When I reached the front, I looked at the display, then the program, then my daughter. Good morning. Nobody answered. The minister looked confused. Mr. Reed, we weren't expecting. I know. Melissa stepped toward me. Dad. I held up my hand. Let me finish. She stopped. I turned toward the room. I appreciate everyone who came here today. A few people looked relieved, then I held up the program. But this says I asked to step away. Melissa's lips parted. I didn't. The minister looked at her. Melissa said, Dad, please. I looked at her. Did I ask you to organize this? You knew about the event? I knew there was a retirement recognition. That's what this is? No. I turned the program around. This isn't just a retirement program. I pointed to the photograph. It's written like a memorial. Nobody spoke. Melissa's attorney, who'd been sitting near the side wall, stood. Perhaps this discussion should happen privately. I looked at him. It can. Then I looked around the room. But the story was told publicly. He sat down. Melissa's voice shook. I was trying to honor you. Then why did you tell the minister I wouldn't attend? Because you said you didn't want a big event. I never said that. You said you wanted to step back. I said I wanted to think about retirement. She looked around. You've been telling everyone I'm doing this because of a business decision. I am. No. Her expression hardened. You're doing this because you're afraid. Afraid of what? Of losing control. I nodded. That's exactly what we're going to talk about. I turned toward the audience. 3 days ago, I discovered that my daughter had created an LLC called Reed Legacy Properties. People shifted in their seats. Melissa went pale. I continued. She created it so my property could eventually be moved into it. Her attorney stood again. That is a private corporate matter. I looked at him. Then why was the property already being offered to a buyer? Silence. Melissa whispered, Dad. I didn't stop. The buyer was told that Melissa had authority to act for me. Her attorney said she had an authorization. Arthur entered through the side door. He didn't make some dramatic entrance. He simply walked toward me carrying a folder. I'd asked him to be there. Arthur stopped beside me. He looked at the minister. May I? The minister nodded. Arthur opened the folder. The property authorization presented to the buyer contains a signature attributed to Thomas Reed. Melissa's attorney stepped forward. This is disputed. Arthur nodded. Correct. He placed the independent examiner's report on the table. The examiner concluded that the signature doesn't match Thomas Reed's verified signatures and wasn't written by him. The room went completely silent. Melissa stared at the report. I watched her. For the first time, she couldn't blame my memory. She couldn't say I'd forgotten. She couldn't say I'd signed something and simply didn't remember. The evidence wasn't about what I remembered. It was about what I'd never done, Arthur continued. The buyer's attorney also received written notice that Melissa's claimed authority was disputed before closing. Melissa's attorney looked at her. You told me the authorization was valid. She said nothing. I looked at Melissa. Did you tell him I signed it? Her eyes filled. She didn't answer. That was answer enough. The minister looked at me. Mr. Reed, I had no idea. I know. He looked toward Melissa. Neither did we. I nodded. That's why the program mattered. People turned toward her. I said, the property sale was the transaction. I held up the memorial program. This was the cover story. Melissa started crying. Not loudly, just tears running down her face. She whispered, I thought you were going to leave me with nothing. The room seemed to shrink around those words. I looked at her. You could have asked me. I did. You asked what would happen, because you wouldn't tell me. You didn't want an answer. She shook her head. You always trusted Andrew more. I took a breath. That's not true. It is no. I looked at her. Andrew came home after your mother died. Her face tightened. I was working. I know. I kept the business running. I know. I was there too. I know. She looked at me. Then why did it never feel like enough? That question stopped me. It wasn't another accusation. It was something deeper, a hurt I hadn't understood. I looked at my daughter. I don't know. She wiped her face. I spent years thinking Andrew was the child you loved when you needed someone. I said nothing, and I was the child you needed when the work had to get done. That hit me, she continued. After Mom died, I stayed here because somebody had to. I know. But every time Andrew came home, you stopped working. I looked down. She was right. Not because he knew the business. She shook her head because he knew you. I didn't have an answer for that. For years, I'd mistaken relying on Melissa for reassuring her. I thought giving her responsibility was my way of telling her I trusted her. She'd experienced it differently. To her, it meant I needed her for work, but not for love. Maybe what she'd heard was, you are useful, while Andrew heard, you are loved. That still didn't excuse what she'd done. Being afraid might explain a betrayal. It didn't erase it. I looked at her. You were afraid I'd leave you behind. She nodded. I was. You thought you had to secure your future before I made a decision. Yes, you should have talked to me, I know. You should never have forged my authority. I know. You should never have told people I'd already stepped away. She closed her eyes. I know. I folded the program. Then I said, the sale is over. Her eyes opened. The buyer is withdrawing. Her attorney looked at Arthur. Arthur nodded. The transaction can't proceed. Melissa looked at me. What happens to the business? You're no longer handling it. She swallowed. Are you firing me? I'm removing you from management and property decisions. She nodded slowly. I understand. That was the first time all morning she didn't argue. The event ended quietly. There was no dramatic applause. Nobody celebrated. People just started leaving. The minister shook my hand before I walked out. I'm sorry. You didn't do anything wrong. I believed her. So did I. Outside the church, Sandra was waiting near the steps. She looked embarrassed. Thomas, yes? I'm sorry. For what? I believed she was acting on your instructions. I know. I should have asked you. Maybe. She nodded, then she said. She was very convincing. I looked back at the church. That's how these things work. The following Monday, Arthur called me before I reached the office. The buyer's attorney confirmed the withdrawal. So it's finished? The transaction is finished. And the property? Still yours. I exhaled. For the first time in weeks, I could feel the tension leaving my shoulders. When I arrived at Reed & Sons, the building looked exactly like it had the week before. Same brick, same front door, same sign, same bell over the entrance. And somehow, seeing all of that felt like a relief. Nothing had been transferred. Nothing had been surrendered. The building was still mine. But I also knew I didn't want to go back to the way things had been. The next decision surprised both my children. I hired an outside general manager, not Andrew, not Melissa, someone who wasn't emotionally tied to the family. Andrew laughed when I told him. Probably the smartest decision you've ever made. I've made plenty of smart decisions. Name 3. I raised you. That's one. I smiled. And I learned that family shouldn't automatically mean management. He nodded. That decision changed the business, and it changed my relationship with Melissa too. For several months, we barely spoke. I didn't call her. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask for a position. She didn't ask me to reconsider the property. Eventually, I noticed something. She'd finally stopped negotiating. In November, she mailed me a letter. It wasn't an apology asking me to forgive her. It didn't try to explain why she was right, and it didn't blame Andrew. It just listed what she'd done. She wrote, I created the LLC. I told the buyer you had authorized me. I used a document with your signature, even though you never signed it. I told people you had already stepped away. I organized the event without asking you what you wanted it to be. At the bottom, she wrote, I don't expect you to trust me. I just wanted to stop pretending I didn't know what I did. I read the letter twice, then I put it in my desk. I didn't call her, not yet. 2 months later, she came to my house on a rainy evening. She stood on the porch holding an envelope. I opened the door. Dad. Hi. She handed me the envelope. What is it? The memorial program. I opened it, same photograph, same words, same lie. But underneath them she'd written, I was wrong. I looked at her. Why bring this? Because I kept thinking about that morning. She wiped her cheek. I thought I was protecting myself. From what? From being left behind. I nodded. That's what you told me. I know. She looked down. I also know that being afraid doesn't make what I did okay. She wasn't asking me to excuse it. She was finally admitting what she'd done. What do you want? I asked. She took a breath. Not the business. Good. Not the house. Good. Not the money. I waited. She looked at me. My dad. That was the first thing she'd said in months that didn't sound like a negotiation. I stepped aside. She came in. We sat at the kitchen table. We didn't talk about the property. We didn't talk about the LLC. We didn't talk about Andrew. We talked about Carol. We talked about Melissa's childhood. We talked about the years she'd felt overlooked. And I admitted something too. I'd always assumed that because Melissa was strong, she didn't need much reassurance. I was wrong. But that night wasn't some big, perfect reconciliation. It was a beginning. Trust wasn't restored just because she apologized. It had to be rebuilt, slowly, through what she did afterward. For the next several months, Melissa kept her distance from the business. When she needed information, she asked the new manager. When she needed something from me personally, she asked instead of assuming. She never requested access to the property files again. She never mentioned the money she thought she deserved. Then, one afternoon, she found an old photograph of Carol standing outside the funeral home on the day we opened the original chapel. She texted me, "Found this. Thought you might want it." I wrote back, "I do." She brought it over that evening. We sat on the porch for 20 minutes. We didn't apologize. We didn't argue. We didn't talk about ownership. We just sat there looking at a photograph of someone we both loved. It was the first peaceful afternoon we'd had together in almost a year. And honestly, that was enough. I kept the memorial program in my desk. Not because I wanted to punish Melissa. I kept it because it reminds me how easily someone can rewrite your identity if you let them speak for you long enough. My daughter never needed me to be legally dead. She needed people to believe I'd already surrendered control. The property was the transaction. The false authorization was the tool. The retirement story was the cover. And for a while, people believed it. But a story only has power if people agree to repeat it. I didn't. I was still alive. I was still the owner. And I was still allowed to tell the truth about my own life. These days, I still work 3 mornings a week. I still drink regular coffee. And every now and then, Melissa brings me decaf anyway. I let her. Not because everything is forgotten. It isn't. And not because the betrayal didn't matter. It did. But forgiveness doesn't mean pretending something never happened. Sometimes it means deciding that what happened doesn't get to decide what happens next. And I never forgot the first sentence printed underneath my photograph. A life of surface, lovingly remembered. I was still alive, and as long as I was alive, my daughter didn't get to write the ending for me. If this story stayed with you, like the video, subscribe to Revenge Realm, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next family betrayal story.